The morning sun had barely risen over the quiet streets of Silver Spring, Maryland, when I heard Officer Haley Simmons' voice cut through the peaceful air like a knife. "Hey, you there. Stop right now." I was watering the flowers in my front yard when I looked up and saw something that made my stomach drop. A tall black man in a gray hoodie and running pants had frozen mid-step on the sidewalk. His hand slowly rose into the air, even though the officer hadn't told him to do that yet. It was like he'd done this before, like he knew exactly what to do when a police officer yelled at him. Officer Simmons' hand rested on her belt, near her weapon. Her face was twisted in suspicion. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at the man like he was some kind of criminal. But all I could see was a man who had been taking a morning walk through our neighborhood, the same neighborhood where I'd lived for 15 years, where nothing bad ever happened, where people jogged and walked their dogs every single day. I said, "Stop." Officer Simmons barked again, even though the man hadn't moved an inch since her first command. "I'm stopped," the man said calmly. His voice was deep but gentle, the kind of voice that reminded me of my grandfather, steady and wise. "I'm just taking a walk, officer." "Taking a walk?" Officer Simmons let out a harsh laugh that had no humor in it. "In this neighborhood? At this hour? I don't think so." My heart started beating faster. I set down my watering can, but I didn't move from my spot. Something about this felt wrong. Very wrong. "I have every right to walk in this neighborhood," the man said, his hand still raised. "I live just 3 blocks from here." "Sure you do," Officer Simmons said, her voice dripping with disbelief. She took a step closer to him. "Let me see some ID. Right now." I glanced around the street. A few other neighbors had started to notice what was happening. Mrs. Chun from across the street had paused while getting her newspaper. Mr. Williams, 2 houses down, had stopped loading his car for work. Everyone was watching, but no one was saying anything. We all just stood there, frozen, like we were watching a movie we couldn't turn off. The man slowly lowered one hand, moving very carefully toward his pocket. "I'm just reaching for my wallet," he announced clearly. "It's in my right pocket." "Slow," Officer Simmons commanded, her hand tightening on her belt. "Real slow." As I watched the scene unfold, I noticed something about the man that Officer Simmons seemed to be ignoring completely. He was wearing expensive running shoes, the kind that cost more than $200. His hoodie, though simple, was made of high-quality material. His watch caught the morning light, gleaming silver on his wrist. This wasn't some random person wandering through our neighborhood. He looked like he belonged here, maybe even more than some of us did. But Officer Simmons didn't seem to see any of that. All she seemed to see was his dark skin. The man pulled out a leather wallet, not a cheap one, but the kind made of real leather that gets softer with age. He opened it with one hand, the other still raised in the air. "Here's my driver's license," he said, his voice still impossibly calm. How was he so calm? If a police officer was treating me like this, I would be shaking. But he stood there like a mountain, solid and unmoving. Officer Simmons snatched the license from his hand. She studied it for a long moment, her frown deepening. "Noah Peterson," she read aloud, saying his name like it was something suspicious. "Says here you live on Maple Street." "That's correct," Noah said. "Like I told you, 3 blocks from here." "Uh-huh." Officer Simmons didn't sound convinced at all. She looked from the license to Noah's face, then back again, like she was trying to find some proof that he was lying. "And what exactly are you doing in this part of the neighborhood?" "I'm taking my morning walk," Noah repeated patiently. "I do it every day. The same route, every single morning." That's when I realized something. I had seen this man before. Not every day, because I wasn't usually up this early, but I had definitely seen him walking past my house on weekend mornings. He always walked with perfect posture, his head up, taking in the morning air. He'd even nodded hello to me once or twice. He was telling the truth. This was his regular route. But Officer Simmons wasn't interested in the truth. "Every day, huh?" She crossed her arms over her chest, still holding his license. "Funny, I've never seen you before." "I've lived here for 2 years," Noah said. There was the tiniest hint of tiredness in his voice now. Like this wasn't the first time he'd had to explain his right to exist in his own neighborhood. 2 years. Officer Simmons raised her eyebrows. In this neighborhood? How does someone like you afford a house on Maple Street? My mouth fell open. Did she really just ask him that? Did she really just question whether he could afford to live in our neighborhood based on, what, the color of his skin? Noah's jaw tightened slightly, the first sign of emotion I'd seen from him, but his voice remained steady when he spoke. I work hard, officer, just like everyone else here. Work hard doing what? Officer Simmons pressed. What kind of work do you do? The way she said work, putting those little air quotes around with her tone, made my blood boil. I wanted to shout at her, to tell her to leave this man alone, but my feet felt glued to my lawn. Why wasn't I moving? Why wasn't I saying something? I work for the federal government. Noah answered simply. Officer Simmons let out another one of those harsh laughs. The federal government. Right. Doing what exactly? Cleaning offices. I gasped. I actually gasped out loud. Mrs. Chin looked shocked too. Even Mr. Williams shook his head in disbelief. Noah's expression didn't change, but I saw his hands, still raised in the air, curl into fists for just a second before relaxing again. I work in the judiciary, he said, his words careful and precise. The judiciary, Officer Simmons repeated mockingly. Big words. You got any proof of this fancy government job? My ID should be sufficient, Noah said. I've shown you my license. I've told you where I live. I've explained what I'm doing. I haven't broken any laws. Am I free to go? Free to go. Officer Simmons stepped even closer to him. I don't think so. Not until I check a few things. You could have stolen that ID. That might not even be your real name. Officer, Noah said, and for the first time I heard a slight edge in his voice. I assure you that is my legal identification, and I have every right to walk on this public sidewalk. You have the rights I say you have. Officer Simmons shot back. And right now, I'm conducting an investigation. An investigation into what crime? Noah asked, what exactly do you suspect me of doing? Officer Simmons' face reddened, looking suspicious, walking through a neighborhood where you don't belong. I do belong here. Noah's voice rose slightly, just a little bit louder. I pay my taxes. I pay my mortgage. I am a resident of this community, and I have every right to... Don't you raise your voice at me. Officer Simmons shouted, her hand moving back to her belt. Put your hands behind your back. Now! Everything seemed to move in slow motion. Noah's eyes widened slightly, not with guilt, but with a horrible realization of what was about to happen. His hands, which had been raised this entire time, began to move behind his back. Wait! I finally found my voice. It came out shaky and scared, but at least it came out. Wait, officer, I know him. He does live here. He walks by my house all the time. Officer Simmons spun around to glare at me, and the look in her eyes made me take a step backward. Ma'am, I need you to go back inside your house. This doesn't concern you. But he hasn't done anything wrong, I protested, my voice getting a little stronger. He's just walking. That's not a crime. I said, go inside. Officer Simmons barked at me, or I'll cite you for interfering with police business. I opened my mouth to argue, but Noah spoke first. It's all right, he said, looking directly at me. His eyes were kind, even in this terrible moment. Thank you for trying to help, but please go inside. I don't want anyone else to get in trouble. Officer Simmons turned back to Noah with a triumphant look on her face. Smart man. Now, like I said, hand behind your back. On what grounds are you detaining me? Noah asked one more time. What crime do you believe I committed? Suspicious behavior. Possible trespassing. Resisting an officer's lawful commands. Officer Simmons rattled off, like she'd memorized a list. That enough grounds for you? Noah slowly put his hands behind his back. The look on his face was something I'll never forget. Not anger, not fear, but a deep, deep sadness. Like he'd seen this story play out 1,000 times before and knew exactly how it ended. Officer Simmons pulled out her handcuffs. That's when I heard it. The sound that would change everything. Another voice called out from down the street. Haley, Haley Simmons, what the hell do you think you're doing? A police car came screeching around the corner, moving fast. It pulled up right behind Officer Simmons' patrol car, and a man in a police sergeant's uniform jumped out. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and a red face that looked angry and panicked at the same time. Sergeant Brooks, Officer Simmons said, sounding surprised and a little defensive. I can see what you're doing, Sergeant Brooks said, walking quickly toward them. His eyes went from Officer Simmons to Noah, and the color seemed to drain from his face. Oh, no. Oh, no, no, no. Please tell me you didn't. Didn't what? Officer Simmons said. She still had the handcuffs in her hand, still stood between Noah and freedom. I'm doing my job. This man was acting suspiciously. Do you know who this is? Sergeant Brooks interrupted her. He wasn't yelling, but his voice had an urgency to it that made everyone on the street lean in closer to hear. Some guy named Noah Peterson, Officer Simmons said with a shrug, claims he works for the government. Sergeant Brooks closed his eyes and muttered something under his breath that I couldn't hear. When he opened them again, he looked at Officer Simmons like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Haley, he said slowly, this is Judge Noah Peterson. He's a federal judge for the United States District Court of Maryland. The street went completely silent. Officer Simmons' face went from red to white in an instant. The handcuffs slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the sidewalk. And Noah Peterson, the federal judge who had stood with his hands in the air for the past 10 minutes while being accused of not belonging in his own neighborhood, simply stood there with that same sad expression on his face. I tried to tell you, he said quietly, but what happened next, what Officer Simmons said, what Judge Peterson did, and what the whole neighborhood witnessed, that was when things went from bad to absolutely explosive. Officer Haley Simmons stood frozen like a statue, staring at Sergeant Brooks like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The handcuffs lay on the sidewalk between her feet, glinting in the morning sun. That's not possible, she finally whispered. He looks like what, Officer Simmons? Judge Peterson's voice cut through the air, sharp as glass now. The gentleness was gone. Finish your sentence. I look like what? Sergeant Brooks stepped between them quickly, holding up both hands. Your Honor, I apologize profusely for this misunderstanding. Officer Simmons is new to this district, and she clearly didn't recognize. There was nothing to recognize, Judge Peterson interrupted, his voice rising. I was walking down a public sidewalk in my own neighborhood. I wasn't wearing a sign that says federal judge. I was just a black man taking a morning walk. And apparently, that was enough to make me a criminal in her eyes. More neighbors had come out now. I counted at least 12 people standing in their yards or on their porches, watching everything unfold. Some were recording on their phones. Mrs. Chun had her hand over her mouth, looking horrified. Mr. Williams was shaking his head slowly back and forth. Officer Simmons seemed to realize, finally, how many witnesses there were. Her face flushed red again, but this time it looked like embarrassment mixed with anger. I was just doing my job, she said defensively. There have been reports of break-ins in this area. There have been no such reports, Sergeant Brooks said firmly. I would know. I'm the one who gets those reports. Well, there could have been, Officer Simmons stammered. I was being proactive, protecting the neighborhood. Protecting it from what? Judge Peterson asked. His hands were now at his sides, but they were shaking slightly. From me? A man who pays more in property taxes for his home on Maple Street than you probably make in 6 months? A man who has served this country in the federal court system for 8 years? A man who has lived in this neighborhood without incident for 2 years. I didn't know. Officer Simmons started. Exactly. Judge Peterson's voice boomed now, and I jumped a little. I'd never heard someone sound so angry and so controlled at the same time. You didn't know. You didn't know anything about me, but you made assumptions. You saw my skin color and decided I was a threat. You saw me walking and decided I must be up to no good. You looked at my expensive watch, my quality clothing, my leather wallet, and you still assumed I couldn't possibly belong here. Sergeant Brooks looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. Your Honor, if we could discuss this at the station. The station? Judge Peterson laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You want me to go to the station? Like a criminal? After I've been stopped, questioned, accused of lying about where I live, had my identification examined like it might be fake, been asked to put my hands behind my back for handcuffs, and you want to go to the station? That's not what I meant, Sergeant Brooks said quickly. I just thought. I know what you thought, Judge Peterson said. You thought if you could get me away from all these witnesses, away from all these cameras, you could make this go away quietly, sweep it under the rug. Maybe have Officer Simmons apologize in private, tell her to be more careful next time, and hope I don't make a big deal out of it. The sergeant's silence told us that Judge Peterson was exactly right. Officer Simmons found her voice again. Look, I said I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. Can we just move on? You didn't say you're sorry. I called out before I could stop myself. Everyone looked at me, including Judge Peterson and both officers. My heart pounded, but I continued. You never actually apologized. It's everyone's business. Mr. Williams spoke up from down the street. His deep voice carried across the lawns. We all saw what happened here. We all heard what you said to him. What I said. Officer Simmons looked around at all of us, and I could see panic starting to set in. I didn't say anything wrong. I was just asking questions. You asked him how someone like him could afford to live here, Mrs. Chin said quietly. Her English had a slight accent, but her words were crystal clear. I heard you. We all heard you. You implied he was lying about his job, another neighbor added. I didn't know his name, but I'd seen him around. You mocked him for saying he worked in the judiciary. You assumed he was cleaning offices. Someone else called out. Officer Simmons spun around. Try to look at everyone at once. You're all twisting my words. I never said. There are at least 6 phones recording this conversation right now. Judge Peterson said calmly, Would you like to reconsider your claim that you never said those things? Officer Simmons' eyes went wide as she looked around and saw all the phones pointed at her. Her face went from red to pale to red again. Sergeant Brooks ran his hand through his gray hair. Everyone, please. Let's all just calm down. I'm sure we can resolve this. Resolve what? Judge Peterson asked. The fact that one of your officers racially profiled me, the fact that she stopped me without cause, detained me without reason, and was about to arrest me for crime of walking while black. That's not fair. Officer Simmons burst out. I never said anything about race. Not once. You're the one making this about race. The neighborhood went quiet. Everyone seemed to hold their breath at the same time. Judge Peterson took a step toward Officer Simmons. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. Let me ask you something, officer. In your 3 months working this district, and yes, I know exactly how long you've been here, because I make it my business to know about the officers patrolling my neighborhood. How many white joggers have you stopped? Officer Simmons didn't answer. How many white people have you questioned for walking down the sidewalk? Judge Peterson continued. How many white residents have you asked to prove they can afford to live here? Still no answer. I'll tell you how many, Judge Peterson said. 0. The answer is 0. I know this because I've been watching. I've been keeping track. Ever since you started patrolling this area, I've noticed a pattern. 3 black residents stopped in 3 months. All of us doing completely normal, legal activities. Mr. Davis was checking his own mailbox when you questioned him. Mrs. Wright was loading groceries into her car in her own driveway when you asked for her ID. And now me, taking my morning walk. My jaw dropped. I hadn't known about the other incidents. Had this really been happening in our neighborhood without most of us noticing? Sergeant Brooks' face had gone pale. Your Honor, I wasn't aware. Of course you weren't, Judge Peterson said, because none of them filed complaints. Do you know why? Because they were afraid. Afraid that complaining would make things worse. Afraid that the next time they got pulled over for a traffic stop, it might not end well. Afraid that standing up for their rights might cost them more than staying silent. He paused, And when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but somehow even more powerful. But I'm not afraid. I can't be afraid. Because a federal judge can be stopped and humiliated in his own neighborhood. What chance does anyone else have? Officer Simmons had tears in her eyes now, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little bit. I was just trying to keep people safe, she said, her voice cracking. Safe from what? Judge Peterson asked again. From me? I'm a man who has dedicated his life to upholding the law. I've sentenced criminals. I protected victims. I've spent years making sure justice is served fairly and equally. And yet, when I walk down the street in my own neighborhood, I'm treated like a suspect. A car pulled up, another police vehicle. 2 more officers got out, both looking confused about what they were walking into. Sergeant Brooks, one of them called, "We got your emergency call. What's the situation?" Sergeant Brooks looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. It's complicated. It's not complicated at all, Judge Peterson said. Your colleague racially profiled me, stopped me without cause, and was about to arrest me, in front of dozens of witnesses, with multiple cameras recording. Does that simplify things for you? The 2 new officers looked at each other, then at Officer Simmons, then at Judge Peterson. One of them, an older woman with sergeant stripes, seemed to recognize the judge. Her eyes went wide. "Oh, my God," she whispered. "Judge Peterson?" "Hello, Sergeant Martinez." Judge Peterson said with a slight nod. "Nice morning for a walk, isn't it?" Sergeant Martinez looked at Officer Simmons with an expression of pure disbelief. "Haley, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything." Officer Simmons shouted. She was fully crying now, mascara running down her face. "Why is everyone acting like I committed some terrible crime? I was doing my job. If this had been an actual criminal, everyone would be thanking me. But I'm not a criminal," Judge Peterson said softly. "That's the point you keep missing. I'm not a criminal. I never was. But you assumed I was because of the color of my skin. I never said that." Officer Simmons screamed. "Stop putting words in my mouth. Stop making this about race when it wasn't. Then what was it about?" Mr. Williams called out. "Tell us, officer, what made you stop him? What exactly looked suspicious about a man walking down the sidewalk?" Officer Simmons opened her mouth, closed it, and opened it again. He was wearing a hoodie. "It's 50 degrees outside," Mrs. Chin pointed out. "Many people wear hoodies in this weather." And he looked like he was casing the houses. Officer Simmons tried again. "I was looking at the sunrise," Judge Peterson said tiredly. "I was admiring my neighbor's gardens. I was enjoying my morning walk, the same way I've done every single day for 2 years. Sergeant Martinez stepped forward, her face serious. "Haley, I need you to be quiet now. Don't say another word." But not another word. Sergeant Martinez turned to Judge Peterson. "Your Honor, on behalf of the Silver Spring Police Department, I offer our deepest apologies for this incident. This should never have happened, and I assure you there will be a full investigation." Judge Peterson nodded slowly. "There will indeed be an investigation, but not just an internal one. I'm calling the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. I'm contacting the ACLU, and I'm filing a formal complaint with the Maryland Police Training Commission." Officer Simmons let out a small sob. "You're going to ruin my career over this?" Judge Peterson looked at her for a long moment. "You ruined your own career, Officer Simmons. The moment you decided that my skin color made me a criminal, you stopped being fit to wear that badge." He turned to address all of us neighbors who were still watching. "I want to thank all of you for witnessing this, for recording it, for speaking up. Because of you, this won't get buried. Because of you, maybe things will change." Then he looked back at Sergeant Brooks. "I'm going home now, to my house, on Maple Street, 3 blocks from here. The house I own, in the neighborhood where I belong. And I expect that when I take my walk tomorrow morning, and every morning after that, I will be left in peace. Is that understood?" Sergeant Brooks nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. You have my word." "Your word," Judge Peterson repeated. We'll see what that's worth. He bent down, picked up his driver's license from where Officer Simmons had dropped it, and put it back in his wallet. Then he turned and began walking away, his back straight, his head high. We all watched him go in silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. We just watched as Judge Noah Peterson walked down the sidewalk, the same sidewalk where he'd been stopped and humiliated just minutes before. He got about 20 feet away when Officer Simmons shouted after him, "You think you're so much better than everyone else. Just because you're a judge doesn't mean you can—" "Haley!" Sergeant Martinez grabbed her arm. "Stop talking. Right now." But Officer Simmons shook her off. "No. I'm tired of being treated like I'm the bad guy here. He's the one who made this into a big deal. He's the one who couldn't just cooperate and show some respect." Judge Peterson stopped walking. He stood there for a moment, his back still to us. Then slowly, very slowly, he turned around. The look on his face made my blood run cold. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something worse. Something that looked like disappointment mixed with a terrible, sad understanding. "Respect," he said quietly. "You want to talk about respect?" He started walking back toward us, and with each step, it felt like the air got heavier. Officer Simmons seemed to shrink with each footstep. "I showed you my identification. That's respect. I answered your questions calmly and honestly. That's respect. I kept my hands where you could see them. That's respect. I explained my presence here without getting defensive, even though I had every right to tell you it was none of your business. That's respect." He was standing right in front of Officer Simmons now. "But you know what you showed me?" Officer Simmons couldn't seem to meet his eyes. "You showed me that no matter what I achieve, no matter what I accomplish, no matter how much good I do in this world, there will always be people like you who see me as less than human, who see me as suspicious, as dangerous, as someone who doesn't belong." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked just slightly. "Do you know what I did before I became a judge? I was a prosecutor. I spent 12 years putting criminals in jail. I worked 70-hour weeks. I missed my daughter's school plays and my son's baseball games because I was too busy trying to make the world safer, trying to make sure people like you could do your jobs without facing the worst of humanity every single day." Officer Simmons was openly sobbing now. "And this is how you repay that service?" Judge Peterson continued, "By assuming I'm a criminal? By treating me like a threat in my own neighborhood?" Sergeant Martinez stepped forward. "Your Honor, please. She's young. She's inexperienced. She made a terrible mistake, but..." "But what?" Judge Peterson turned to her. "But I should forgive her? But I should understand? But I should let it go because she didn't mean it? How many times, Sergeant? How many times should I forgive? How many times should I understand? How many times should I let it go?" He looked around at all of us watching. "Every single one of you standing here, every white neighbor who witnessed this, you're all thinking the same thing right now. You're thinking this is terrible. This is wrong. This shouldn't happen. And you're right. It is terrible. It is wrong. It shouldn't happen. But it does. Every single day. To people who don't have federal judge titles. To people who don't have expensive lawyers. To people who can't fight back. The morning sun had fully risen now, bathing the street in golden light. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like the light was exposing something ugly that had always been there, hiding in plain sight. Judge Peterson took a deep breath. "I'm going to make sure this matters. I'm going to make sure that what happened here today leads to real change. Not just for me, but for every person of color who has to worry about taking a simple walk in their own neighborhood." He turned back to Officer Simmons one last time. "And you, Officer Simmons, are going to be the example. Not because I'm vindictive. Not because I'm trying to ruin your life. But because sometimes one person has to face consequences in order for the system to start taking these problems seriously." With that, he turned and walked away again. This time, nobody tried to stop him. We all stood there in the street, processing what had just happened. Sergeant Martinez was on her radio, calling for someone, probably her captain or chief. Sergeant Brooks was talking in a low, angry voice to Officer Simmons, who sat down on the curb and put her head in her hands. The other neighbors started to drift back to their houses, talking quietly among themselves. Mrs. Chin caught my eye and shook her head sadly. Mr. Williams gave me a look that said, "Can you believe this?" I couldn't believe it, but at the same time I could, because now that I thought about it, I'd seen little things before. The way some neighbors clutched their purses tighter when Mr. Davis walked by. The way Mrs. Wright got extra questions when she was moving in, like people needed to make sure she really was buying a house and not just visiting. The way people looked surprised when they found out Judge Peterson was a federal judge, like they'd assumed he must have some less impressive job. I'd seen it all, but I'd never really seen it. Not until now. Not until it had been laid bare in the bright morning sun for everyone to witness. And something told me that what we'd witnessed this morning was just the beginning, because Judge Pearson had made a promise to make this matter, to create real change. And somehow, I knew he was exactly the kind of person who kept his promises. The question was, what would happen next? What would Officer Simmons do? What would the police department do? And most importantly, what would our neighborhood do with this knowledge that had been forced into the open? As I walked back to my house, my flowers forgotten and wilting the heat, I realized that everything had changed. Our quiet street in Silver Spring, Maryland, would never be quite the same again. The thing is, as I reached my front door, I heard sirens in the distance. More vehicles were coming, and I had a feeling that what seemed like the end of the confrontation was actually just the beginning of something much, much bigger. The sirens got louder and louder until 3 more police cars came racing down our street, followed by a black SUV with tinted windows. I was standing in my doorway, not quite inside, not quite outside, unable to look away from what was happening. A man in a dark suit stepped out of the SUV. He was tall, probably in his 60s, with white hair and the kind of presence that made everyone automatically pay attention. He walked straight up to Sergeant Martinez with long, purposeful strides. "Someone want to tell me," he said in a voice that could cut through stone, "why I'm getting phone calls from the mayor's office, the NAACP, and 3 different news stations about an incident on this street." Sergeant Martinez stood up straighter. "Chief Donovan, sir, there's been a situation." "I can see there's been a situation." Chief Donovan snapped. He looked around at all the neighbors still watching, at all the phones still recording, at Officer Simmons still sitting on the curb crying. "Where's Judge Peterson?" "He went home, sir," Sergeant Brooks said quietly. "He lives 3 blocks over on Maple Street." Chief Donovan closed his eyes and took a deep breath, like he was trying very hard not to explode. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. One of my officers stopped a federal judge, while he was taking a morning walk in his own neighborhood." "Yes, sir," Sergeant Martinez confirmed. "And this officer," Chief Donovan pointed at Officer Simmons without looking at her, "didn't recognize him? Didn't know who he was?" "No, sir. Officer Simmons is new to this district. I don't care if she started yesterday." Chief Donovan's voice got louder. "Every officer in this department knows who Judge Noah Peterson is. His picture is on the wall in our main office. He's presided over cases involving our officers. He lives in this district. There's no excuse, absolutely no excuse, for this level of incompetence." Officer Simmons stood up shakily. "Sir, with all due respect, you don't get to talk." Chief Donovan finally looked at her, and the fury in his eyes made her step backward. "You don't get to say a single word right now, Officer Simmons. The only thing you get to do is hand over your badge and your weapon." The street went silent again. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. "Sir," Officer Simmons whispered, You're suspending me?" "Suspending you?" Chief Donovan let out a harsh laugh. "That would be getting off easy. I'm putting you on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation. Badge and gun. Now!" Officer Simmons' hands shook as she unclipped her badge from her uniform. Tears ran down her face, smearing her makeup even more. "This isn't fair," she sobbed. "I was just doing my job. Your job is not to racially profile residents." Chief Donovan shouted. "Your job is not to stop law-abiding citizens without cause. Your job is not to humiliate a federal judge in front of his own neighbors. I didn't know he was a judge." Officer Simmons cried out, "And that's the problem. Chief Donovan took the badge and weapon from her shaking hands. The fact that you didn't know he was a judge isn't the issue. The issue is that you wouldn't have stopped in the first place if he'd been white. A news van pulled up at the end of the street. Then another one. Then a third. Reporters started jumping out with cameras and microphones. Chief Donovan cursed under his breath. Sergeant Martinez, get Officer Simmons out of here. Take her through the back streets. I don't want any cameras on her until after we've talked to our lawyers. Yes, sir. Sergeant Martinez took Officer Simmons by the arm and started leading her toward one of the patrol cars. But Officer Simmons pulled away. No, I'm not running away like I did something terrible. I stopped someone who looked suspicious. That's my job. He looked suspicious because he was black. A voice called out. I turned and saw it was Mr. Williams again. He'd come back outside, and now he walked closer to the group of officers. That's what you mean, isn't it? He looked suspicious because he was a black man in a nice neighborhood. I never said that. Officer Simmons protested. You didn't have to say it. Another voice joined in. It was Mrs. Chan. She'd also come back, and she was holding her phone up, the screen glowing. I have the whole thing recorded. Every word, every accusation. Would you like me to play it back for you? Chief Donovan turned to Mrs. Chan. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to send that video to our Internal Affairs Division. I'll send it to them, Mrs. Chan said firmly. But I'm also sending it to the news stations, to the ACLU, and to anyone else who needs to see what happened here today. That's your right, Chief Donovan said, sounding tired. I wouldn't expect anything less. A reporter with a camera crew pushed through toward them. Chief Donovan, is it true that one of your officers racially profiled Judge Noah Peterson this morning? Chief Donovan's jaw tightened. We are conducting a full investigation into this morning's incident. That's all I can say at this time. But the officer is being suspended? Another reporter called out. On administrative leave, Chief Donovan corrected. And I repeat, that's all I can say right now. More reporters were arriving. Our quiet street was turning into a circus. Neighbors who had gone inside were coming back out. People from other streets were walking over to see what was happening. I saw someone setting up a professional camera on a tripod. That's when I noticed a familiar figure walking back down the sidewalk. Judge Peterson had returned, but he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, a black woman in an elegant pantsuit, carrying a briefcase. Behind them walked two more people, a man and a woman, both in business attire. That's his wife, Mrs. Chin whispered to me. She'd moved to stand next to me in my yard. Dr. Sarah Peterson. She's a professor at Johns Hopkins. The crowd of reporters immediately swarmed toward Judge Peterson and his wife, but the two people behind him moved quickly to block the cameras. Judge Peterson will make a statement. The man announced in a loud, clear voice. But first, give them space. Everyone stepped back. The reporters reluctantly moved back a few feet. Judge Peterson and his wife walked straight up to Chief Donovan. Up close, I could see that Dr. Peterson looked furious. Her jaw was set, her eyes blazing. Chief Donovan, she said, her voice ice cold. I'm sure you remember me. Dr. Peterson, Chief Donovan nodded. Of course. Good, because I want you to remember this moment very clearly. She stepped closer to him. That officer humiliated my husband. She treated him like a criminal. She made him stand with his hands in the air like he was some kind of threat, in front of his neighbors, in front of people we see every day, people we have dinner with, people whose children play with our children. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and Judge Peterson put his hand on her shoulder. Sarah, he said softly. No, Noah. She shook her head, not taking her eyes off Chief Donovan. They need to hear this. Our son is 12 years old. He's starting to look like a man. And after what happened to you this morning, I'm terrified. I'm terrified that the next time he walks to his friend's house, or rides his bike to the store, or just exists while being black, someone like Officer Simmons will see him as a threat. And unlike you, he doesn't have a title that might protect him. He's just a boy, a child. And apparently, that's not enough to keep him safe. Chief Donovan's face had gone pale. Dr. Peterson, I understand your concerns. Do you? She interrupted. Do you really? Because this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Your department has a pattern. My husband told you about Mr. Davis, about Mrs. Wright. There have been others too. And every time we're told it's an isolated incident, a misunderstanding. But how many isolated incidents does it take before we admit there's a systemic problem? One of the people who'd come with them, the woman in the business suit, stepped forward. My name is Attorney Jennifer Lewis. I represent Judge Peterson and his family. As of this morning, we are filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Silver Spring Police Department, Officer Haley Simmons, and the city of Silver Spring. The reporters went crazy, shouting questions all at once. Cameras flashed. Everyone started talking at the same time. Chief Donovan held up his hands. Please, everyone, let's remain calm. Calm. Dr. Peterson's voice rose. You want us to remain calm? My husband was almost arrested this morning for taking a walk. Don't you dare tell us to be calm. Officer Simmons, who was still standing near Sergeant Martinez, suddenly shouted, I already said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? Everyone turned to look at her. You never said you were sorry. Judge Peterson said quietly. Not once. Not sincerely. You made excuses. You blame me for not cooperating. You accuse me of making this about race, when you were the one who made it about race from the very first moment you saw me. That's not true. Officer Simmons pushed past Sergeant Martinez. I would have stopped anyone who looked like... She stopped suddenly, realizing what she was about to say. Like what? Attorney Lewis asked sharply. Please, Officer Simmons, finish that sentence. Officer Simmons' face went red, like they didn't belong. And what made you think Judge Peterson didn't belong? Attorney Lewis pressed. Was it his expensive clothing? His quality shoes? His leather wallet? Or was it the color of his skin? I don't. Officer Simmons stammered. Let me make this very simple, Attorney Lewis said. She pulled a folder from her briefcase and held it up. This is a report documenting every stop made by Officer Haley Simmons in the 3 months she's been assigned to this district. Want to guess what we found? Nobody answered. 43 stops, Attorney Lewis continued. 43 times she stopped someone to question them or check their identification. Of those 43 stops, 38 were black or brown individuals. 5 were white. And of those 5 white individuals, 4 teenagers who Officer Simmons suspected of vandalism. Only 1 was an adult, and that stop lasted less than 2 minutes. She pulled out more papers. The stops of black and brown individuals, the average length was 12 minutes. 12 minutes of questioning, of running IDs, of searching for any possible reason to justify the stop. Judge Peterson's stop this morning had already lasted 10 minutes before Sergeant Brooks arrived, and Officer Simmons was preparing to arrest him. Where did you get that information? Chief Donovan demanded. Those records are public information. Attorney Lewis said smoothly, available through a simple records request, which we filed 2 hours ago, as soon as Judge Peterson called me. I felt my mouth fall open. Judge Peterson had called his lawyer 2 hours ago. That meant he'd called while he was being stopped, before Sergeant Brooks even arrived. Attorney Lewis seemed to read my mind, or maybe she just saw my expression. Judge Peterson managed to make a brief phone call, while Officer Simmons was examining his driver's license. He told me what was happening, and I immediately began gathering evidence, because unlike Officer Simmons, we knew exactly what this was about. A reporter pushed forward. Judge Peterson, how do you feel about what happened this morning? Judge Peterson looked at the reporter for a long moment. Then he looked at all of us, the neighbors, the police officers, the growing crowd of people who'd gathered on our street. How do I feel? He repeated. I feel tired. I feel angry. I feel sad. But most of all, I feel determined. He stepped forward, and when he spoke again, his voice carried across the street, strong and clear. What happened to me this morning wasn't just about me. It was about every person of color who has ever been made to feel like they don't belong. like they're suspicious, like they're less than human. It was about every parent who has to teach their children how to survive being stopped by police. Every person who has to work twice as hard, be twice as good, achieve twice as much, just to be seen as equal. He paused, and I saw tears glistening in his eyes. I became a judge because I believe in justice. Real justice. Not the kind that protects some people and targets others. Not the kind that changes based on the color of your skin. But true, blind justice that treats everyone with dignity and respect. He looked directly at Officer Simmons. You took that away from me this morning. You made me feel, for just a moment, like all my accomplishments meant nothing. Like my title meant nothing. Like I was nothing. Just another black man who didn't belong. Officer Simmons was crying again, but this time it looked different. Not angry tears or scared tears, but something else. Something that might have been the beginning of real understanding. But here's what you didn't count on, Judge Peterson continued. I have a voice. I have a platform. I have resources. And I'm going to use all of them to make sure this never happens again. Not to me. Not to anyone. He turned to the cameras. This lawsuit isn't about money. Any damages we receive will go directly to organizations fighting racial bias in policing. This is about change. Real, meaningful change. And it starts right here, right now, on this street in Silver Spring, Maryland. The crowd erupted in applause. Some of my neighbors were clapping. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Mr. Williams had his fist raised in the air. Chief Donovan stepped forward. Judge Peterson, I want to assure you that we take this matter very seriously. Officer Simmons will face appropriate consequences, and we will review all of our training procedures to prevent something like this from happening again. That's a good start, Judge Peterson said, but it's not enough. I want independent oversight. I want community input. I want real accountability, and I want it in writing. We can arrange a meeting, Chief Donovan began. No meetings, Attorney Lewis interrupted. We want action. We want changes implemented within 30 days. We want a citizens review board with real power. We want mandatory bias training for all officers. We want data collection on every stop, including race, duration, and outcome. And we want it all publicly available. Chief Donovan looked like he'd been hit by a truck. That's a lot of changes. It's necessary, Judge Peterson said firmly. And if you're not willing to make those changes voluntarily, we'll get a court order. I assure you, I know quite a few federal judges who would be very interested in this case. A new voice joined the conversation. He's right, you know. Everyone turned to see who'd spoken. An older black man in a police uniform was walking down the street. He had captain's bars on his shoulders. Captain Johnson, Chief Donovan said, sounding surprised. I didn't call you. I know, Captain Johnson said. I heard about it on the news. Couldn't believe it, so I drove over to see for myself. He walked straight up to Judge Peterson and extended his hand. Your Honor, I apologize on behalf of every good officer in this department. What happened to you this morning is unacceptable. Judge Peterson shook his hand. Thank you, Captain. Captain Johnson turned to face Officer Simmons. His expression was hard. I've been a police officer for 32 years. I've seen a lot of changes in that time. Some good, some bad. But one thing that hasn't changed enough is this. We still have officers who let their biases affect their judgment. He walked closer to Officer Simmons. I know what it's like to be judged by the color of my skin. I know what it's like to be assumed to be less capable, less intelligent, less deserving. I've experienced it in this department. From fellow officers who didn't think I should be promoted. From citizens who assumed I couldn't possibly be a captain. So when I hear about an incident like this, it doesn't just make me angry as a police officer. It makes me angry as a black man. Officer Simmons looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. Sir, Save it, Captain Johnson said. Whatever you're about to say, save it. Because right now, your words don't matter. Only your actions do. And your actions this morning told us everything we need to know about what's in your heart. He turned back to Chief Donovan. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to head the internal investigation into this incident. Chief Donovan nodded slowly. Approved. And I'd like to recommend that we accept Judge Peterson's demand for reform. All of them. Because he's right. What happened today can't happen again. The morning sun was getting higher, and it was getting hot. I realized I'd been standing in my yard for almost 2 hours. My legs were tired. My throat was dry. But I couldn't move. None of us could. We were all witnessing something important. Something that would be remembered. Judge Peterson looked at his wife, then at his lawyers, then at all of us watching. I want to thank my neighbors, he said. The ones who spoke up, who recorded what happened, who refused to look away. You could have stayed inside. You could have pretended you didn't see. But you didn't. And because of that, there's hope for real change. He looked directly at me, and I felt my face get warm. Thank you, he said simply. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Now, Judge Peterson said, turning back to the officials, I'm going home, to my house, to have breakfast with my wife and children. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to take my walk. The same walk I take every morning. And I expect that I will be able to do so without harassment, without suspicion, without being made to feel like I don't belong in my own neighborhood. Nobody argued. Nobody objected. Judge Peterson and Dr. Peterson turned and walked away, their lawyers following behind them. The reporters shouted questions, but they didn't answer. They just walked away with dignity and grace, holding hands. But as I watched them go, I noticed something that made my heart sink. 3 houses down, on the other side of the street, someone had spray-painted something on their garage door. The paint was still wet, dripping down the white surface. In big red letters, it said, Race Trader, and it was pointing toward my house. I stared at the words on the garage door, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Race Trader. The letters seemed to get bigger the longer I looked at them, like they were growing, spreading, taking over everything. Oh, my God, Mrs. Chin whispered beside me. She'd seen it, too. Other neighbors started noticing. People pointed. Someone gasped. The reporters immediately swarmed toward the house with the spray paint, cameras flashing. The house belonged to the Hendersons. Jim and Margaret Henderson, a retired couple who'd lived on our street for 20 years. They were standing in their driveway now, staring at their garage door with expressions of shock and horror. We didn't. Margaret Henderson's voice shook. We didn't do this. We would never. Chief Donovan was already walking toward them, Captain Johnson right behind him. When did this happen? The chief asked. I don't know. Jim Henderson looked like he might cry. We were inside watching the news coverage. We just came out and it was there. I felt sick to my stomach. Someone had done this while we were all standing here, while we were all focused on Judge Peterson and the police officers. Someone had snuck around and spray-painted a message of hate on the Hendersons' garage. But why the Hendersons? What did Race Trader even mean in this context? Then I realized where the arrow was pointing. Not exactly at my house, but close enough. At the houses of those of us who had spoken up, who had defended Judge Peterson, who had recorded what happened. Mr. Williams seemed to realize it at the same time I did. Check your properties, he called out loudly. Everyone who spoke up this morning. Check your houses, your cars, your yards. People scattered. I ran around to the side of my house, my hands shaking. Please don't let there be anything. Please, please, please. My car was fine. My windows were fine. But when I got to my backyard, I saw it. Someone had dumped garbage all over my garden. The flowers I'd been watering that morning, the flowers I'd been so proud of, were covered in coffee grounds, eggshells, and other rotting trash. And stuck in the middle of it all was a sign made from cardboard. Mind your own business. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Not because of the mess. I could clean that up, but because of what it meant. Because someone in my neighborhood, someone I probably knew, had done this to punish me for speaking up. Mrs. Martinez. I heard Mr. Williams shout. I ran back to the front yard. Mr. Williams was standing next to his car. All 4 tires had been slashed. And on his windshield, written in what looked like soap or maybe white paint, were the words, "Keep your mouth shut." Mrs. Chun came running from her house, her phone in her hand. Someone broke my mailbox, she said, her voice high and frightened. It's completely destroyed. And there's a note. She held up a piece of paper with shaking hands. It says, "Go back to where you came from." The street erupted in chaos. More neighbors were discovering vandalism. The Johnsons found paint thrown on their front door. The Williamses discovered their garden hose had been cut into pieces. Even young Tommy Martinez, who was only 16 and had been recording on his phone, found his bicycle with both wheels bent and twisted. Chief Donovan was shouting into his radio, "I need every available unit to this location now. We have multiple acts of vandalism, possibly a coordinated attack." But I knew what this really was. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a message, a warning, a threat to anyone who dared to stand with Judge Peterson. Captain Johnson walked over to me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I nodded, even though I wasn't all right at all. "My garden. Someone dumped trash in my garden." He wrote something in a notebook. "I'll need to document it. Can you show me?" As I led him to my backyard, I heard raised voices from the street. I turned back to see what was happening. A group of neighbors I hadn't noticed before had gathered together. They were standing apart from the rest of us, and they didn't look sympathetic. They looked angry. "This is what happens," one of them shouted. It was Derek Morrison, who lived 4 houses down. "This is what happens when you make everything about race. Now look at our neighborhood. It's falling apart." "Our neighborhood was already falling apart," Mr. Williams shot back. "We just didn't want to see it." "Oh, please." A woman I didn't recognize, maybe she was from another street, pushed forward. "That judge made a huge deal out of nothing. The officer was just doing her job." "How do you know it was about race?" Derek Morrison challenged. Maybe he really did look suspicious. "Suspicious doing what?" Mr. Williams demanded. "Walking? Is walking suspicious now?" "In a hoodie, early in the morning. Yeah, maybe it is." "I wear a hoodie on my morning walks all the time," Mrs. Johnson called out. She was white, probably in her 50s. "Nobody's ever stopped me. Nobody's ever questioned me. Want to guess why?" Derek Morrison's face turned red. "This is different." "How?" Mrs. Johnson pressed. "How is it different? Explain it to me." He couldn't. He just stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish. But another voice joined in, a man I recognized as Tony Castellano, who lived on the corner. "You people are blowing this way out of proportion. So a cop stops someone and asks questions. Big deal. If you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. That's easy to say when you're white." Mr. Williams' voice boomed across the street. "That's real easy to say when you've never been stopped for driving while black, or walking while black, or just existing while black." Oh, here we go with the race card. Tony Castellano threw his hands up. "Everything is about race with you people." "You people?" Mr. Williams took a step toward him. "You want to clarify what you mean by you people, Tony?" Captain Johnson moved quickly between them. "Gentlemen, please. This isn't helping anyone." But it was too late. The divide had been exposed. Our neighborhood, which I'd always thought was friendly and peaceful, had split right down the middle. On one side were those of us who saw what had happened to Judge Peterson as wrong, as racist, as something that needed to change. On the other side were those who either didn't see it or didn't want to see it, and who were angry at us for making them uncomfortable. More police cars arrived. Officers started taking statements, photographing damage, collecting evidence. The reporters were having a field day, interviewing anyone who would talk to them. That's when I saw Judge Peterson and Dr. Peterson returning. They must have heard about the vandalism because they came back quickly, their lawyers still with them. Judge Peterson's face was grim as he looked at the damaged properties. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I brought this on you." "No," I said firmly, surprised at myself at how strong my voice sounded. "This isn't your fault. This is the fault of whoever did this, of people who think racism is okay as long as nobody talks about it." Dr. Peterson walked over to me. Up close, I could see she was younger than I thought, maybe early 40s. Her eyes were kind but sad. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. To all of you." She looked around at the other damaged properties. This is what we face every day. This is what happens when you stand up against injustice. They try to silence you. They try to scare you. They try to make you regret speaking out. Well, I don't regret it, Mrs. Shin said, walking over to join us. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. I don't regret recording what happened. I don't regret speaking up. And I won't let some coward with spray paint make me regret it. Me neither, Mr. Williams added, coming over despite his slashed tires. I've been quiet too long. We've all been quiet too long. More of the neighbors who'd spoken up earlier gathered around us. The Johnsons, the Williamses, young Tommy Martinez, and several others. We formed a group, standing together. On the other side of the street, Derek Morrison and Tony Castellano, and their supporters watched us with hostile eyes. Our neighborhood had become a battlefield. Chief Donovan finished a phone call and walked over to Judge Peterson. Your Honor, we're treating this as a hate crime. We're collecting evidence from all the vandalized properties. We'll have officers patrolling this neighborhood 24/7 until we catch whoever did this. It's not just one person, Judge Peterson said quietly. Look at the scope of this. Multiple properties hit at the same time. While everyone was distracted, this was coordinated, planned. Attorney Lewis pulled out her phone. I'm calling the FBI. This could constitute witness intimidation in a federal civil rights case. As she stepped away to make the call, a news van with a satellite dish pulled up. A woman in a sharp suit got out. I recognized her from the evening news. She was one of those big-time reporters from the national networks. Judge Peterson, she called out, walking quickly toward us with her camera crew. Sandra Mitchell, CNN. Can you comment on the vandalism targeting your supporters? Judge Peterson looked at the camera, then at all of us standing around him, then back at the reporter. Yes, he said, I can comment. He straightened his shoulders and looked directly into the camera. What you're seeing here is exactly why we need change. When people speak up against racism, against injustice, against discrimination, they face retaliation. They face intimidation. They face violence. This is not new. This has been happening for centuries. The only difference is that now it's being recorded. Now, the whole world can see it. Do you think this vandalism is directly related to what happened this morning? Sandra Mitchell asked, holding the microphone toward him. I don't think I know, Judge Peterson said firmly. Every single property that was vandalized belongs to someone who witnessed what Officer Simmons did to me, someone who spoke up, someone who recorded it. This is retaliation, pure and simple. This is an attempt to silence anyone who dares to call out racism when they see it. What do you want to say to the people who did this? The reporter asked. Judge Peterson was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm but powerful. I want to say that you failed. You thought you could scare us into silence. You thought you could make us regret standing up for what's right. But all you did was prove exactly why this fight is necessary. All you did was show the world that racism isn't just about one police officer making a bad decision. It's about a system, a culture, a mindset that punishes anyone who challenges it. He paused, and I saw him glance at Dr. Peterson. She nodded at him, encouraging him to continue. And I want to say to everyone watching this, if you see injustice, speak up, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when there might be consequences. Because silence is what allows hatred to thrive. Silence is what allows discrimination to continue. And I, for one, refuse to be silent anymore. The neighbors standing with us started clapping. It started soft but grew louder. Even some of the police officers joined in. But across the street, Derek Morrison and his group weren't clapping. They were scowling, arms crossed, looking angrier by the second. This is ridiculous. Derek finally shouted, You're turning this whole thing into a circus. You're dividing this neighborhood. The neighborhood was already divided. Judge Peterson called back. It's just that now you can see the division. Now you have to acknowledge it. And that makes you uncomfortable. You're damn right it makes me uncomfortable. Tony Castellano stepped forward. I've lived here for 15 years. This used to be a nice, quiet neighborhood. Now we got news vans and protests and vandalism. All because you couldn't just cooperate with a police officer. Cooperate. Dr. Peterson's voice cut through the air like ice. My husband did everything he was supposed to do. He showed his ID. He answered questions. He kept his hands where the officer could see them. He was polite and respectful. And she still treated him like a criminal. So tell me, Mr. Castellano, what more should he have done? Should he have apologized for being black? Should he have thanked her for stopping him? Should he have just accepted being humiliated because that would keep the neighborhood quiet? Tony Castellano had no answer. That's what I thought, Dr. Peterson said coldly. Sandra Mitchell turned her camera toward the group across the street. Do you gentlemen believe Officer Simmons was wrong to stop Judge Peterson? I believe she was doing her job. Derek Morrison said, and I believe all of this. He gestured at the cameras, the police, the crowd, is making a mountain out of a molehill. A molehill? Mrs. Chen's voice shook with anger. My mailbox was destroyed. There was a racist note telling me to go back where I came from. Is that a molehill? That's not racist. Derek argued. It's just what? Mrs. Chun challenged. Just a suggestion? Just friendly advice? I was born in this country. My parents were born in this country. Where exactly should I go back to? Derek's face turned red, but he didn't answer. Captain Johnson stepped forward. All right, everyone needs to calm down. We're not going to solve anything by yelling at each other. Maybe we need to yell, Mr. Williams said. Maybe that's the problem. We've been too polite, too quiet, too worried about making people uncomfortable. Well, you know what? I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable living in a neighborhood where a federal judge gets stopped for walking. I'm uncomfortable knowing my son might face the same thing. I'm uncomfortable watching my neighbors defend the indefensible. Nobody's defending anything. Tony Castellano shot back. We're just saying that not everything is about race. Then what is it about? Mr. Williams demanded. Tell me. Give me one good reason why Officer Simmons stopped Judge Peterson that doesn't involve the color of his skin. Just one. Silence. Nobody from the other group had an answer. Attorney Lewis came back, putting her phone away. The FBI is sending agents. They'll be here within the hour. She looked at all of us. They're going to want to interview everyone, both the victims of the vandalism and anyone who might have seen something. Good luck with that, Derek Morrison muttered. Nobody saw anything. Nobody's going to say anything. People around here mind their own business. Is that a threat? Captain Johnson asked sharply. It's a fact, Derek said. This neighborhood takes care of its own. We don't need outsiders coming in and telling us how to live. Outsiders? Judge Peterson repeated. I live here. These people live here. We're not outsiders. You know what I mean, Derek said. Yes, Judge Peterson said quietly. I know exactly what you mean. The tension on the street was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel it pressing down on all of us, making it hard to breathe. That's when we heard the sound of breaking glass. Everyone spun around. One of the windows in Judge Peterson's car had been shattered, and sitting in the middle of the broken glass was a brick with something written on it. Captain Johnson ran to the car, pulling on gloves before carefully picking up the brick. His face went pale as he read what was written on it. What does it say? Chief Donovan demanded. Captain Johnson looked at Judge Peterson, then at Dr. Peterson, then at all the cameras filming. He seemed to be deciding whether to say it out loud. Tell them. Judge Peterson said quietly. Let everyone see what we're dealing with. Captain Johnson held up the brick so the cameras could see. Written in black marker were 3 words. This isn't over. Dr. Peterson gasped and grabbed her husband's arm. Judge Peterson's face went hard as stone, and I realized with a sinking feeling in my stomach that this morning's confrontation with Officer Simmons had been just the beginning. What we were facing now was so much bigger, so much more dangerous than one racist cop. We were facing a neighborhood, maybe even a community, that was willing to fight to keep things exactly as they were. A neighborhood that saw calls for justice as threats. A neighborhood that would rather attack the victims than confront the problem. As FBI agents began arriving on our street, As more news crews showed up, as helicopters started circling overhead, I looked around at the faces of my neighbors. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. Some looked determined. And some, the one standing with Derek Morrison and Tony Castellano, looked like they were preparing for war. Judge Peterson stood in the middle of it all, his wife by his side, and said one more thing to the cameras. They want this to be over. They want us to be quiet, to go away, to stop making noise. But I promise you, this is just getting started. 3 days had passed since the brick went through Judge Peterson's car window. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Our street looked like a war zone. Police cars were parked at both ends, officers watching everyone who came and went. News vans were still there, though fewer than before. Yellow police tape marked off areas where evidence had been collected. And everywhere you looked, there were signs. Some signs said justice for Judge Peterson and Black Lives Matter and end racist policing. These were in the yards of me, Mrs. Chun, Mr. Williams, and others who had spoken up. Other signs said, support our police and all lives matter, and keep politics out of our neighborhood. These were in Derek Morrison's yard, Tony Castellano's yard, and about a dozen others. Our neighborhood had become a symbol. People from all over Maryland were coming to see it, to take pictures, to pick sides. Some days there were protesters marching up and down the street, chanting. Other days there were counter-protesters yelling back at them. I hadn't slept well in 3 days. Every sound made me jump. Every car that drove by made me look out the window. The FBI had been to my house twice, asking questions, showing me pictures of people, trying to figure out who had vandalized our properties. They still hadn't caught anyone. It was Thursday morning, exactly 3 days after everything started, when things finally came to a head. I was in my kitchen, drinking coffee and trying to pretend everything was normal when I heard shouting outside. Not protest shouting or chanting. Angry shouting. Fighting. I ran to my front door and looked out. A crowd had gathered in the street. At the center were Derek Morrison and Mr. Williams, standing face to face, both of them red-faced and furious. You need to leave. Derek was shouting. You and your kind need to get out of this neighborhood. My kind? Mr. Williams shouted back. Say what you really mean, Derek. Say it. I mean troublemakers. Derek yelled. People who can't just live peacefully. People who have to turn everything into a racial issue. The only trouble here is people like you. Mr. Williams pushed Derek's chest with one finger. People who want to pretend racism doesn't exist as long as it doesn't affect them. Derek pushed back, harder. Mr. Williams stumbled, but didn't fall. That's when Mr. Williams' teenage son, Marcus, came running from their house. Dad, don't. But it was too late. Derek swung his fist. It connected with Mr. Williams' jaw with a sickening crack. Mr. Williams went down hard. Everything happened so fast after that. Marcus threw himself at Derek, knocking him to the ground. Tony Castellano ran over and grabbed Marcus, pulling him off. Mr. Williams was getting back up, blood running from his mouth. More people were running over, some to help, some to fight. The police officers at the end of the street came running, blowing whistles, shouting for everyone to stop. I stood frozen on my porch, watching my neighborhood tear itself apart. That's when I saw Judge Peterson. He came striding down the street from his house, still 3 blocks away, but walking fast. Dr. Peterson was with him, almost running to keep up. Stop. Judge Peterson's voice cut through all the shouting, all the chaos. Everyone stop right now. Something in his voice, the authority, the power, made everyone freeze. Even Derek and Mr. Williams, who were both being held back by police officers, stopped struggling. Judge Peterson walked into the middle of the crowd. He looked at Derek Morrison's bloody knuckles. He looked at Mr. Williams' bleeding mouth. He looked at Marcus Williams crying and shaking. He looked at all of us standing there. Neighbors who used to smile and wave at each other, now divided into angry groups. Look at yourselves, he said quietly. Just look at what's happening here. Nobody spoke. This is exactly what they want. Judge Peterson continued. Whoever vandalized these properties, whoever threw that brick through my window, whoever is trying to intimidate us into silence, this is exactly what they want. They want us fighting each other. They want us divided. They want us so busy attacking each other that we forget what this is really about. What is it about? Derek Morrison spat blood from his mouth. One of the police officers had let him go, and he stood there swaying slightly. You tell me, Your Honor, what is this really about? Because from where I'm standing, it's about you making a big deal out of nothing and destroying this neighborhood in the process. Destroying it? Judge Peterson's voice rose. I'm destroying it? Not the person who spray-painted hate messages? Not the person who slashed tires and broke mailboxes? Not the person who threw a brick through my window? Not the police officer who racially profiled me? I'm the one destroying the neighborhood. You could have let it go. Derek shouted. You could have just moved on. But no, you had to call lawyers in the FBI and the news media. You had to make it into this huge thing. You had to turn us into a battleground. I didn't turn us into anything. Judge Peterson shouted back, and I'd never heard him sound so angry. This neighborhood was already a battleground. The battle has been going on for years. The only difference is that now you have to see it. Now you can't pretend it doesn't exist. There you go again with the race stuff. Tony Castellano yelled from the crowd. Not everything is about race. Then what is it about? Dr. Peterson stepped forward, her voice shaking with emotion. Please, someone explain to me what it's about if it's not about race. Why was my husband stopped? Why were other black residents stopped? Why is it that the white residents of this neighborhood never have to worry about taking a morning walk? Maybe because we don't look suspicious, someone from Derek's side yelled. I couldn't see who it was. The words hung in the air like poison. There it is, Mr. Williams said softly, wiping blood from his chin. There's the truth. We look suspicious. Just by existing, we look suspicious. More police cars were arriving. I saw Captain Johnson getting out of one, Chief Donovan from another. They looked tired and stressed. This situation was spiraling out of control, and everyone knew it. Everyone needs to go home, Chief Donovan announced loudly. Right now, anyone who refuses will be arrested for disturbing the peace. Disturbing the peace? Mr. Williams laughed bitterly. There hasn't been any peace. That's the whole point. Mr. Williams, I understand you're upset, but... Chief Donovan started. Upset? Mr. Williams interrupted. My son just watched me get punched in the face for defending a man's right to walk down the street. So yes, Chief, I'm upset. Derek Morrison to the first punch, Captain Johnson said, pulling out handcuffs. Mr. Morrison, put your hands behind your back. What? Derek's eyes went wide. You're arresting me? What about him? He pushed me first. A push is not the same as a punch, Captain Johnson said firmly. Hands behind your back. Now. As Captain Johnson handcuffed Derek Morrison, the crowd on Derek's side started getting louder, angrier. They pressed forward, shouting about unfair treatment, about police protecting certain people, about reverse racism. The crowd on our side pressed forward too, shouting back, defending the arrest, demanding Derek be charged with assault. The two groups were getting closer to each other, the space between them shrinking. I could feel the violence building in the air like electricity before a storm. Enough! Judge Peterson's voice boomed out again. He stepped between the two groups, holding his arms out wide. This is to stop right now. Get out of the way, someone from Derek's side yelled. This is your fault. My fault. Judge Peterson looked at the person who'd yelled, a woman I didn't recognize. My fault that I was racially profiled. My fault that people vandalized properties? My fault that a man just assaulted another man in the middle of the street? How is any of that my fault? Because you couldn't just let it go, the woman screamed. Because you had to be a victim. Because you had to make everything about you. Dr. Peterson stepped up beside her husband. He's not making anything about him. This has never been about him. It's about every person of color in this country who has to live with the knowledge that they could be stopped, questioned, arrested, or worse, just for existing. It's about a system that sees black and brown skin as inherently suspicious. It's about centuries of racism that people want to pretend is over just because it makes them uncomfortable to talk about it. I'm not racist, the woman shouted. I have black friends. I voted for Obama. Having black friends doesn't mean you can't be racist, Mrs. Shin said, her voice quiet but clear. I learned that the hard way. I used to think the same thing. I used to think that because I was nice to everyone, because I didn't use racial slurs, I wasn't part of the problem. But silence is part of the problem. Looking away is part of the problem. Pretending everything is fine when it's not. That's part of the problem, too. More people were arriving. Not just neighbors now, but people from other parts of Silver Spring, from other parts of Maryland. Some came to support Judge Peterson. Some came to protest what they saw as attacks on police. The crowd was getting bigger and bigger. Captain Johnson was on his radio, calling for backup. We need crowd control units here now. The situation is escalating. A news helicopter flew overhead, the sound of its blades drowning out some of the shouting. That's when I saw her, Officer Haley Simmons. She was standing at the back of the crowd on Derek Morrison's side, wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a T-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked smaller somehow, younger, without her uniform. And she was crying. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was because I was tired of all the anger. Maybe it was because I saw something in her face that looked like genuine regret. Maybe I was just losing my mind after 3 days of stress and fear. But I walked over to her. Officer Simmons, I said quietly. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I'm not an officer anymore, she said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for days. I resigned yesterday. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she continued, the words spilling out in a rush. I didn't think, God, I messed up so bad. Yes, I said simply. You did. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I know I did, and I can't take it back. I can't undo what I did to Judge Peterson. I can't fix what I broke. So, why are you here? I asked, why are you standing with them? I gestured at Derek Morrison supporters. I'm not, she said. I mean, but I've been listening to what people are saying, to what Judge Peterson has been saying. And I think, she stopped, took a shaky breath. I think maybe he's right. About me, about why I stopped him, about what it means. Before I could respond, someone from the crowd noticed her. That's her, a voice shouted. That's the cop. Suddenly, everyone was looking at Officer Simmons, or former Officer Simmons. The crowd surged toward us. Judge Peterson pushed through the people. Stay back, he commanded. Everyone stay back. He reached us and positioned himself between Officer Simmons and the angry crowd. Whatever you want to say to her, you say it through me. Why are you protecting her? Someone from our side yelled. She's the one who started all this. I'm not protecting her, Judge Peterson said. I'm protecting the principle that mob justice is still wrong, even when we're angry, even when we have good reason to be angry. He turned to face Officer Simmons. They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other. The noise of the crowd faded into the background. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Why are you here? Judge Peterson asked her, his voice quiet now. Officer Simmons wiped her eyes. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not the fake apology I tried to give before. A real one. Okay, Judge Peterson said. I'm listening. Officer Simmons took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. When I saw you that morning, I did make assumptions based on your skin color. I did see you as a threat before I had any reason to. I did treat you like a criminal when you were just a man taking a walk. Her voice broke. I told myself I wasn't racist. I told myself I was just doing my job, being careful, protecting people. But that was a lie. I was racist. I am racist. Because racism isn't just about using bad words or being in the KKK. It's about the assumptions we make, the biases we have, the way we see some people as dangerous and others as safe, based on nothing but the color of their skin. She looked around at all of us watching. I've been racist my whole life without even knowing it, without wanting to be. But that doesn't matter, does it? The impact is the same whether I meant to be racist or not. The hurt I caused is the same. The damage I did is the same. Judge Peterson's expression was unreadable. What do you want from me? Forgiveness? No, Officer Simmons said immediately. I don't deserve forgiveness. I wanted you to know that I understand now, that I see what I did, that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to do better, trying to be better, trying to undo even a tiny bit of harm I've caused. Words are easy, someone from the crowd called out. Actions are what matter. You're right, Officer Simmons said, turning to face the crowd. Words are easy. So here's an action. I'm going to testify in Judge Peterson's lawsuit. I'm going to tell the truth about everything, about what I did, about why I did it, about the pattern of discrimination in the department. I'm going to help prove his case, even though it means admitting in court, in public, that I'm a racist. The crowd went quiet. I'm going to work with the ACLU, she continued. I'm going to help train other officers to recognize their own biases. I'm going to speak at schools and community centers and anywhere else that will have me, and I'm going to tell them my story. I'm going to be an example of exactly what not to do, and maybe someday that will matter more than my words. Judge Peterson studied her face for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I don't forgive you. I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did to me that morning was wrong. The way you treated me was wrong. And I'm still angry about it. Officer Simmons nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. But, Judge Peterson continued, I appreciate what you just said. I appreciate that you're finally being honest with yourself and with everyone else. And if you're serious about helping, about testifying, about trying to create change, then maybe something good can come from something terrible. He turned to address the entire crowd. Both sides, all of us. This is what I've been trying to say. This is what this whole thing has been about. Change doesn't happen when we just yell at each other. It doesn't happen when we divide into sides and fight. It happens when people are willing to look at themselves honestly, to admit when they're wrong, to do the hard work of changing their hearts and minds. Dr. Peterson joined her husband, taking his hand. None of us are perfect. We all have biases. We all have blind spots. The question is, what do we do about them? Do we deny they exist? Do we get defensive and angry? Or do we listen, learn, and try to do better? Captain Johnson stepped forward. Judge Peterson is right. This department has problems. I know it. Chief Donovan knows it. And now, thanks to what happened here, the whole world knows it. We can either fight against change and keep making the same mistakes, or we can embrace change and become better. Chief Donovan nodded, though he looked uncomfortable. We're implementing all the reforms Judge Peterson requested. Citizen Review Board, bias training, public data collection, all of it. It starts next month. Next month isn't good enough, Attorney Lewis said, stepping forward. She'd been there the whole time, watching everything. We want it starting next week, and we want to be involved in every step of the process. Chief Donovan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Fine, next week. A cheer went up from our side of the crowd, but it died quickly when we looked across at the other side. They weren't cheering. They looked angry, defeated, like we'd won something and they'd lost. This isn't a victory for one side, Judge Peterson called out, seeming to sense the tension. This is a victory for everyone. Because when policing is fair, when everyone is treated with dignity and respect, when we address racism instead of pretending it doesn't exist, everyone benefits. All of us, not just black and brown people. Everyone. That's easy for you to say. Tony Castellano shouted. He pushed through the crowd to the front. You're getting everything you want. We're the ones losing. Losing what? Dr. Peterson asked. What exactly are you losing, Mr. Castellano? He struggled to answer. I'm losing. We're losing. Things are changing. Yes, Dr. Peterson said softly. Things are changing, and change is scary. I understand that. But sometimes change is necessary. Sometimes the way things have always been isn't the way things should be. Tony Castellano looked around at his supporters. Some of them were nodding slowly. Like maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand. Others still looked angry and resistant. "I need a drink," Tony muttered and walked away. Slowly, people started to disperse. The crowd broke up into smaller groups. Some people left. Some stayed, talking quietly. The police officers started removing the barriers they'd set up. Derek Morrison was loaded into a police car, still in handcuffs. As the car drove away, I saw him looking out the window at what was left of the crowd. He didn't look angry anymore. He just looked sad and confused, like he couldn't understand how the neighborhood he'd known for 15 years had turned into this. Mr. Williams was being checked by a paramedic. His jaw was bruised and swollen, but he was okay. His son Marcus stood next to him, holding his hand. Mrs. Chin was talking to a reporter, telling her story about immigrating to America as a child, about building a life here, about what it felt like to be told to go back where you came from. And I stood there, looking at my house, my home, and wondering what came next. Judge Peterson walked over to me. "Thank you," he said, "for speaking up that first day, for not staying silent, for standing with us even when it got hard." "I should have spoken up sooner," I said. "I should have noticed what was happening in our neighborhood before it got to this point." "We all should have," he said. "But we're noticing now. That's what matters." Dr. Peterson joined us. "Would you and the other neighbors who were vandalized like to come over for dinner tonight? I think we should get to know each other better. Build a real community, not just a neighborhood." I smiled. "I like that." As they walked away, I looked up and down our street. It still looked like a war zone. There were still signs in yards. There were still news vans and police cars. There were still people who were angry and resistant to change. But there was also something new, something that hadn't been there before. There was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, what happened here would lead to real change. Hope that Officer Simmons' apology was genuine and would lead to her actually doing better. Hope that even people like Derek Morrison and Tony Castellano might eventually come around. Hope that our neighborhood could heal and become stronger. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be fast. There would be setbacks and struggles and more fights along the way. But Judge Peterson had been right that first morning when he'd said this wasn't over. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The real work of change, the hard, uncomfortable, necessary work of examining our biases, confronting our racism, and building a truly just and equal community, that work was just starting. And this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. None of us were. As the sun began to set over Silver Spring, Maryland, casting long shadows across our divided street, I realized that what had seemed like an ending was actually a beginning. The morning Judge Peterson was stopped for walking, while black, had sparked something that couldn't be put out. It had sparked a movement, a conversation, a reckoning. And whatever came next, we would face it together. All of us who had found the courage to speak up, to stand up, to refuse to let injustice hide in the shadows any longer. The story of what happened on our street would be told for years to come. It would be studied and discussed and debated. Some would say we overreacted. Some would say we didn't go far enough. But no one would be able to say we stayed silent. And sometimes, refusing to stay silent is the most important thing you can do. As I walked into my house that evening to get ready for dinner at the Petersons, I took one last look at our street. The police were finally leaving. The news vans were packing up. The protesters had gone home. Our street looked quiet again, almost peaceful, but it would never be the same as it was before. And that, I realized, was exactly the point. Change had come to Silver Spring, Maryland, and it had started with one racist cop stopping one black man on a morning walk. A man she didn't know was a federal judge. A man who refused to let the moment pass. A man who turned his humiliation into a movement. Judge Noah Peterson had promised to make this matter, to create real change. And as I closed my door and prepared to join him and his family for dinner, I knew with absolute certainty that he would keep that promise, because some promises are too important to break, and some fights are too important to give up. This was one of them.